Normally, my co-host hates the NBA MVP debate, but with a mere 2 weeks of games to go, we can start talking in resolutes and casting our votes appropriately. Vegas has the latest MVP voting odds listed as such. Joel Embiid is the favorite at minus 200, running away from Nikola Jokic at plus 150, Giannis Antetokounmpo plus 800, and then the distant dark horses in the top five, Devon Booker at plus 2,500. Then you have Luka and Ja tied respectively at 5 with plus 5,000. Meanwhile, ESPN did their own internal poll of 100 members of the media, and the Joker was selected to repeat. Kyle, after hearing what Vegas and ESPN think, what do you think?
Well, as someone who stands a little bit for Giannis Antetokounmpo every now and then, I'd like to point out that currently right now, Giannis Antetokounmpo has a higher player efficiency rating than Joel Embiid. It's not by much. It's a 32.4 compared to the 31 for Joel Embiid, but I understand that we're tired of giving Giannis MVP considerations. We all know he's the best player in the world.
Getting that old LeBron James treatment, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, he's still going to finish in the top 2 or top 3 or whatever he ends up getting, but, we're just a little tired of giving it to Giannis. I will remember this historically the same way I remember that James Harden finished in the top 2 of MVP voting 4 times in 5 years, because James Harden was that dude for a long time. He is amazing at basketball. So Giannis is probably not going to get it, but I'd argue that it's a toss-up between Jokic and Giannis. That would be my pick there. I think Jokic being in like the 5 seed is the thing that people are holding against him. That team is basically the 2018 Orlando Magic outside of Nikola Jokic, and he's doing his best, man. He hasn't had Murray the whole season. He hasn't had Porter the whole season. I argued that he should try and force a trade to the Phoenix Suns this week. Is in a really rough situation, and also he's been the NBA MVP this year, putting up 26 points, about 12 rebounds, close to a triple-double average, and Nikola Jokic also has the highest player efficiency rating of any player in the NBA over the past 3 seasons. This might be one of the most efficient and most productive seasons in the NBA. And for people who maybe don't tune in every now and then, player efficiency rating is the statistic that most reflects the eye test in the NBA. 17 of the last 20 NBA MVPs have led the league in player efficiency rating. There is no perfect stat, but player efficiency rating is a good one for determining the eye test of who is the best player in the league.
Well, you did mention this is a very compelling MVP race because a lot of these guys, or specifically Embiid, Jokic, and Giannis, are all fairly close in those player efficiency stats. They're very close in a lot of statistics, and I can make compelling cases for all 3 of them off various statistics. When I think about Embiid was my favorite for the majority of the year, and maybe I'm starting to waver a little bit as I start to kind of like do a little bit more research into recent MVPs and how the committee has voted on their MVP decisions, how the media has voted on their MVP decisions. For Joel Embiid, if I'm still trying to make that case, I would say, hey, he is second in the league in scoring, right behind LeBron James at 29.9 points per game. We talk about Jokic not having really a supporting cast, and yes, he has Harden now, but I think we got to remember with Joel Embiid how he was carrying the 76ers while Ben Simmons was on his extended vacation since the playoffs. The fact that Embiid was the driving force for that team while Simmons was not there, and obviously getting James Harden helped him, but we're still saying that this is still a very Joel Embiid driven team. So his value, I don't think has really taken that much of a hit comparatively. When you think of Jokic to be a repeat MVP, what are you doing that's excelling your team? Do you talk about, you mentioned a great point, Jamal Murray being out. Michael Porter Jr. has also missed parts of the season as well. He's probably not going to come back to the playoffs. Almost averaging a triple double. And this is where I kind of have to be a little bit consistent for all my dogging of Westbrook. The fact that I've started to get to the point where I look at the triple double staff and I don't revere it as much as I used to. Now it just kind of seems like a run-of-the-mill thing, especially when it came to Westbrook and you literally saw guys bailing out of the box to let Russ get that rebound. It kind of diminished that stat to me, and I got to the point where triple-double, yeah, that's nice, that's cool, but is it really like the make or break between winning games? For Jokic, it is, because he's also a very dynamic scorer. The fact that he's still averaging 26 points per game, I think, is a big part of why his team is winning, and I don't don't think that takes anything away from him. And then I look at Giannis here. So the 2-time MVP, third in scoring behind Embiid. So it's not like he's a bad scorer compared to the rest of the pack. In fact, he's third in scoring comparatively, which is a career high for him. And if it's a career high for a former MVP, and that means he's outpacing his MVP seasons, then that should say, well, isn't he more of an MVP this year? He's doing better than he was doing in his MVP seasons, right? He's shooting more free throws. He's shooting his free throws at a better percentage. He's second in the NBA in plus minus. So all the stats are there for Giannis as well to be that guy. And they're all great defenders. These guys don't just ham it up on the offensive end and then just don't give a damn about their defense. No, they're all top 5 defenders. So this is a very close, very razor thin margin of MVP debate. And you can just nitpick it to death depending on what stats you like. So you are saying Giannis is your guy today.
I would say Jokic is the person I would want to give the award to, but
I'm giving you an MVP vote, Kyle.
Can I split it between Jokic and Giannis? Can I split?
You can give me a first, second, and third place MVP vote.
All right, so we're gonna do this thing. So this is a coin. Heads is going to be Jokic. Tails is going to be Giannis. Let's see what I get. Tails. So I guess Giannis number 1, Jokic number 2, and Embiid number 3. You know, one of the things that is also interesting about this is I know that the NBA MVP is supposed to be who is the best player in just the 2021-2022 season, but like unofficially, NBA fans have started to use the MVP as like a way to remember seasons. So like the 2017 season is like defined by the Russell Westbrook MVP, or the 2019 season is defined as the Giannis MVP season, or they define it by the champion or whatever it is. So if we're going to use the MVP award as like the main thing that we use to tell NBA history, which I don't think is the right thing to do, because someone who finished second in the MVP, like James Harden 3 times, is still a ridiculously great player.
Yeah, but you know, 20 years from now, the only ones who are going to remember that is who you would call old heads.
Do we want that to be the case? Is the thing. Do we want that to be the way
it's going to be the case? Because no one remembers the AFC Championship game loser from 1979. Just part of how
I think it was the Raiders. Might have been the Raiders. Let me see. But even still,
unless you're an absolute sports junkie, you know, we still have to cater to more casual fans. Not everyone cares about sports as much as we do, unfortunately.
It was apparently the Houston Oilers. The Houston Oilers apparently lost the AFC Championship to the. I knew the Pittsburgh Steelers won it, but I wasn't sure who lost it. It was the Houston Oilers.
But for the people that don't know the blood type of the assistant head coach of the 1982 Lakers, this is how we can measure or look at people's like history, you know, MVPs, titles, NBA all teams, which too, these guys are still going to get rewarded in some aspect on the all NBA teams or the all-star teams. That's part of their history as well. It's not like you lost out on the MVP, you get nothing, you go home, 0 prizes, Charlie, go home, Charlie. You get
so
nothing.
If that's good, if we're going to do it that way, and if we want to tell NBA history to casual fans through MVP awards and championships, which we already do now, like we already said, guy has no rings, therefore he's a bum, which we do less of now, but that's obviously some of the way that this goes. If we want to cater that way to casual fans and tell NBA history through MVP and through like champions, then give it to Joel Embiid. Because if we're picturing out the most fair painting of NBA history from this era of basketball, how would you define the NBA from 2018 to 2022? If you're trying to make a map of NBA history, you would say 2 MVPs for Giannis, 1 for Jokic, 1 for Embiid, 1 for James Harden, and that would be a great way to explain it. Is Giannis was slightly better than Jokic and Embiid, but Jokic and Embiid were the second and third best players of their generation. And so if that's the way we want to tell the story, and we don't want to put Giannis and Jokic on the same platform of 2 MVPs, I understand doing that. It would be a more accurate picture of NBA history. It's just a philosophical question of sorts of whether or not we want to tell NBA history through just these first place MVP awards.
And there's multiple arguments you could look at an MVP discussion from. There's the pure baseline of statistics, and obviously we've given you the statistics here, and they're all very impressive for all three of these guys. But one that I think also needs to be inserted into this debate, and I know we're having this with John Morant and the fact that the Grizzlies are 18-2 in games without him here, but what value do you provide to your team? How would your team perform if you were not there? And when I look at those records, so currently the 76ers in games Joel Embiid have missed are 5-8, so a 385 winning percentage. In games in which Jokic has missed the season, the Nuggets are 2-5 with a 286 winning percentage. In games that Giannis has missed this season, the Milwaukee Bucks are 6-5 with a 545 winning percentage. So that stands out. If you're making a purely value-based argument, that kind of stands out that Giannis is the only one of these three games in which his team has played without him. They actually win at not a great clip, 6-5. That's nothing to write home about, but that's going to get you into the playoffs. They have all-stars around him too, like Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday. If Giannis had to miss an extended period of time, the Milwaukee Bucks might be one of these play-in style teams. When I look at Jokic, if the Nuggets didn't have him, in addition to the other injuries that they already have on their roster, this is a lottery team. When I look at the 76ers with Ben Simmons' absence, pre-Harden, even if they did have Harden, they might struggle to fight for a play-in game. And if Harden never happened, they would definitely be a lottery team without Joel Embiid based off that 385 winning clip. So if I infuse the value basis of this argument, then I'm probably leaning towards a guy like Jokic myself, because clearly his team is absolute garbage without him. There's no difference.
So here's the interesting part about that. Where the logic is slightly flawed in that is that we're assuming that we're only taking Embiid, Giannis, and Jokic off the team when they're not playing games. There could be a mass substitution during one of those games in which like all three of the Bucks are sitting or all of the 76ers are sitting. So it's not the most accurate picture of value, but like you said, when you were just describing it, like we know the Nuggets would be dog shit without Nikola Jokic. We know the 76ers would struggle without Joel Embiid, and we know that if Giannis was taken off the Bucks would be like the 7 seed in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah,
and
they have enough pieces to compete. They're not the Nuggets, they're not the 76ers in regards to their MVP. And we even kind of saw it a little bit when Giannis went down in the playoffs last year. Obviously, it was great for them that Giannis was able to instantly heal. A little bit of Mr. Miyagi magic thrown on him.
You mean average 38, 15, and 10 in the NBA Finals with a flamingo leg?
Exactly. No doubt that if the Bucks don't have Giannis in that series, it's done. It's gone.
Yeah. All of this debate ultimately becomes a philosophical question. How do we want our MVP award to be? Because I know Rachel Nichols on The Jump for years was always articulating the NBA needs an Offensive Player of the Year award. And you could argue that the scoring title kind of works like an Offensive Player of the Year award, but I think like Bradley Beal might win the scoring title one time if you go back in history. So it's not the most accurate.
Even this year, I look at like LeBron James' performance this year, and we all accept that LeBron is just stat padding at this point. And I would almost hate to reward LeBron this year. And no disrespect to LeBron. I'm unlike the majority of our generation of sports pundits that hate on LeBron. LeBron is actually one of my most favorite players in the league. So I kind of hated when he went to the Lakers as a Celtics fan, because I want to see LeBron succeed, but I also hate to see the Lakers succeed. So this season has been bittersweet for me because I kind of hate the criticism in a way that LeBron has received, but I kind of hate rewarding stat patty behavior in the same way that Russell Westbrook has lost a lot of cachet for me over the years. That's the same way I kind of review rewarding LeBron this year. And that's why instantly I can't have someone that's like 13 games under 500 on their team in the MVP discussion. There's some people that are still trying to make LeBron for MVP debates. No, it's between these three guys, because all three of these guys are in the playoffs. All three of these guys have impressive statistical resumes, and all three of these guys are worthy members of NBA history. As you mentioned, they are some of the greatest of their generation. It's interesting to see the second tier guys like Luka, like a Devin Booker, like a job, because I've heard people make the argument, well, shouldn't MVP also be best player, best team? And that's where Devin Booker, you look at him and you're like, why isn't he more on this? Why isn't he more discussed? Because the Suns have just been running away with the number one seed from beginning to end. Chris Paul has missed games at times this season, and it's been strictly on Devin Booker. Why isn't Booker getting a little bit more love? Actually, do you have an opinion on that one?
I mean, I think Devin Booker is criminally underrated, but I'm also not going to put him as an MVP. Like, it's just.
But why not? His team is extension of him. His team is one of the best teams in the league because he's on their team. Hence, he is valuable. Is he most valuable?
This is the same philosophical question that we had earlier, which is, what do you want your MVP to be? Right? Like, so in the 80s and 90s, like when we had numbers, but we weren't paying attention to numbers. And by the way, not every game was on television, right? So you couldn't watch every team every single night. You didn't have advanced analytics and you didn't have access to every single NBA game every single night. So in that world, people defaulted to best player on best team because that was just the information that they had was, here are the standings. Who is the best team? We're going to give it to whoever was the best player on the best team. It's how Karl Malone ended up with 2 MVPs during the 1990s. But that's just the information that people had access to. And it was a way of telling NBA history, was this team excelled in the regular season. Let's reward its best player with the MVP, as long as that player wasn't Gary Payton. And so this was how they told the story then. And now we have access to data and analytics. And over the past 20 years, player efficiency rating, which again, it's the stat that most reflects the eye test. 17 of the last 20 MVPs were the top in player efficiency. And the only times that people didn't give it to the most efficient player was for narrative storytelling of NBA history. So I point out these 3 examples all the time. The 3 players in the last 20 years that didn't lead the league in efficiency rating that won MVP. 2009 Kobe, because Kobe needed to have 1 MVP for people to like tell the story of NBA history in the 2000s. 2012 Derrick Rose, it was either 2011 or 2012, whatever year Derrick Rose won MVP. LeBron was the most efficient player that year, and Westbrook in 2017, which I think Harden was the most efficient player that year. So I think 2009 also was Chris Paul, by the way. So Chris Paul might have gotten robbed of an MVP by that one Kobe
Quick question
season.
here. Do you think the NFL does the MVP debate better?
I think in the NFL, it's easier to do it. I think in the NBA, we place so much value on the MVP in the NBA that all of a sudden the debate gets muddied because we want Jason Tatum to be acknowledged for how great of a season he is. And we want Devin Booker to be acknowledged for how great of a season he had.
I guess why I say that is because you say that the NBA is a little bit more reliant on trying to sell their MVP from a storytelling, from a historical standpoint. And yet Drew Brees, as great as he was, never won an MVP in his career. Russell Wilson, as great as he is, has never received a vote. Whereas like these guys, because they're so phenomenal, because they're so great, if they were NBA players, would they have gotten more consideration for these awards?
So I think both don't do it perfectly, but the NBA does it worse than the NFL. And it's not to say like the NBA is actively trying to do this. It's just how the story gets told in the NBA. We can't watch every single NBA game.
And I think there is obviously an issue in comparing them in which they are apples and oranges, because obviously the MVP discussion in the NFL has been reduced to best quarterback. It's currently a quarterback.
Which normally is the case. By the way, I don't even think that's a bad thing, by the way. I don't think reducing it to quarterback
because
is
we
a bad
agree,
thing because
we can make the case, and it's a very good case, that the quarterback is the most valuable position on a football field, whereas an NBA, and we're talking about positionless basketball being a more new age thinking, a guard could have as much impact in game as a center, or a dynamic wing could have a good impact in a game. Now it's interesting that we're seeing 2 amazing centers in Jokic and Embiid, and we're seeing a power forward in Giannis who are leading the MVP discussions, and LeBron obviously as one of the most dynamic forwards, although you could consider him a pseudo point guard as well. Obviously has led this. And we thought for a while that it was going to be small guards that were leading the MVP discussion. We thought Steph Curry broke the MVP discussion. And here we are in 2022, and we're talking about 2 centers at the top, and Giannis, who gets criticism.
We were all so dumb. We were like, look at Steph Curry. He's going to change the NBA. When in reality, Kevin Durant was changing the NBA right in front of our eyes, and we were all too dumb to recognize it.
Big guys
because
win. It's simple, it's stupid, but big guys are important in the NBA.
We wanted to believe that 6'2" average Joes could take over the NBA. I know 6'2" is nothing to sneeze at, but 6'2" by NBA standards, we wanted to believe average Joes
swipe rights on Tinder.
As a 6'2" man myself on a good day, that we wanted to believe that 6'2" people could take over the league, but What happens when the 6'11" people start shooting 3-pointers, huh? What happens when the 7-foot people can put the ball on the floor? I've seen Joel Embiid do a spin move and a windmill dunk. What happens
then you got
when
big
Jokic,
guards like Luka?
I was going to say Jokic, yeah, we talked about this 4 years ago, and it's even more true today watching the Nuggets this year, which I haven't done a lot of. I'm not going to lie. I haven't watched a lot of Nuggets this year, but I've watched a lot of Nuggets in the past. Nikola Jokic is a point center. He is the first point center in the history of the NBA. The same way Bill talked about like Magic as the first point forward, which became Scottie Pippen as a point forward, and LeBron's a point forward. Jokic is a true point center. He is the first of his kind point center in the NBA, where he is 7 feet tall, plays a traditional big man role, and takes the ball up the floor because the entire offense runs through him. But he can make passes as good as point guards from a 7-foot center position, bringing the ball up the floor, and the entire offense runs through Jokic. That was what Daryl Morey calls a super skilled 5. And the NBA began moving to super skilled 5s as soon as the 4 best players in the sport all became super skilled 5s. People realized that that is the next trend. Is Kevin Durant is totally unguardable because he is 7'1" and can shoot over everyone at the levels of the best shooters of all time. And LeBron James does everything Michael Jordan can do, and he's 70 pounds heavier than Michael Jordan.
We all just agree, though, that Kristaps Porzingis is the real trailblazer here.
So close. Kristaps was so close, man. Like the world is not ready to have the conversation of if Anthony Davis was healthy, he'd be as good as Tim Duncan. But Anthony Davis kind of weirdly paved the way for all of this stuff. In a weird way, Anthony Davis in Kentucky in 2012 paved the way for a lot of this stuff.
If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas.
It's so strange, man. It's so strange. Anthony Davis should be in this MVP race every single year. He should be a super skilled 5 because he can play point guard and jump 15 feet in the air. It's crazy.
I guess I have to make a definitive pick. You know what? I'm going to go with you. I think Giannis, I think what it is for me as I start to review the stats more is, again, if he was an MVP and we all agreed he was an MVP a couple years ago, and now he's putting up better numbers than he was in his MVP season, how is it that I cannot give that guy when I know his impact on winning? I saw, yes, I'm tying in last year. Yes, I'm probably doing a dumb thing from an NBA argument, but I'm tying in last year. I know he can win a championship. I know he can elevate a team over the top. And now I know what his stats mean. I know they're not meaningless, empty calorie stats. I know all of his stats impact winning. And that's why I got to go with Giannis as my MVP